To those who actually read the terms and conditions before clicking agree, what red flags have you seen that the rest of us didn't? I read the detailed rules of a poker room once, when they described the bad beat jackpot, a promotion where, if you have a once in a lifetime hand and still lose, you win a jackpot for being so unlucky. The example they gave had 5 kings in it, 3 kings in the board and 2 in the hand. For those unfamiliar, there are 4 kings in a deck. I pointed it out, and the manager laughed and said I was the first person to ever catch that. I worked at company that gave me a contract that said not only did they own any code I developed at work, they also owned any code I produced at any time during the contract of my employment, even at home. I refused to sign, and then they winked and complained about having to produce a one-off special contract just for you because everyone else signed. They told me we are just doing this to protect ourselves. I told them I was doing this to protect myself too. I worked for my university while going to school. My job had nothing to do with my degree or coding. While in university I developed a program and a company wanted to buy it. My university stepped in and claimed they had rights. I said fuck you, no you don't. I'm not even coding for you guys. They said my work description had other duties as assigned as 5% of my job, so it was a catch-all. They then claimed they had all rights to any ideas, code, or anything I developed or create, even at home. I was a part-time hourly at the time. The friendly compromise they gave me was that I could sell it, do all the legwork, developing and meetings, but while I worked at the university they would get 50% of all profits. Once I left they would get 100% of profits. The whole legal bullshit of it scared away the buyer. Fuck you, university. I didn't need that money to, I don't know, pay off the student loans I took to pay you a fuck ton for school. Some TNCs have a clause that says they can update the TNCs retroactively. For example, 23andMe says they don't sell your data to Sinner and Aetna as of 2020. But in 2022 when 23andMe gets sold to Bain Capital, they decide to update their TNCs to say they can sell your data to health insurance companies retroactively. So your data from 2018 can now be sold. Don't sell your social media data to Facebook, but really don't sell your DNA to a for-profit company. Eventually they'll lose enough money to do some shady shit with it. Yeah, whenever I get a TNC or similar document, the first thing I search for is update and see what the rules around updating the terms are. If it's anything along the lines of we can change these terms anytime we like, we don't have to notify you, and you automatically agree to abide by the new terms 0, then I know I don't have to read anything else, because it doesn't matter what the terms currently say, and just nope straight out of there. 0, which is more common than you'd like to think if you generally don't read TNCs. Not technically a TNC, but we have a release and disclosure we have to have employees sign that drive any of our vehicles, so we can run their driving record annually. If you actually read it, it also allows the company to check their background, employment, address, and phone number history, credit, criminal history, and pretty much whatever they want for an unspecified amount of time. It's scary what rights we sign away so easily. It's not like you have a choice. In the employer/employee relationship, the employer has the VST majority of the power. Oh, you don't want to give them your firstborn child? Well, go work somewhere else that also wants your firstborn child. They'll be happy to take one of the hundreds of other people begging for your job. We need more and stronger unions. We need a true and proper Labour Party that supports the working people to guarantee the sort of basic human dignity protections other countries seem to be able to accomplish. Then we wouldn't be forced to choose between literal homelessness with no healthcare or having a job, but giving away all our rights for the privilege. I read them for software we buy at work. They all specify that you don't own the software, that the product does not have to do any of the things that they say it does. They can cut off your access to the software at any time for any reason, and if the software destroys your world, then too bad, you have no recourse of any kind. If it is any kind of social media, then you also get the we 100% own everything that you upload/post for all time and can do whatever the fuck we want with it clause. I was at a real estate closing once, and anyone who has done this knows there is a ton of legal paperwork to sign. So I started reading the first document, and the lawyer starts clearing his throat. Finished the first one, signed it, then started the second one. Lawyer speaks up, "If you are going to read every one of these, then we are going to run out of time." I said, "If you want me to sign these, then I'm going to read them." He stood up and said, "I don't have time for this." So I stood up and said, "That's too bad," and I grabbed my coat and walked out. I got a panicked call from the mortgage company that afternoon because it was a sizable amount of money. I explained that I don't sign things unless I know what I'm signing. The woman said she would get back to me, but would I consider scheduling another closing that afternoon because all the documents had that day's date? I said maybe, but not with that lawyer. I showed up for a medical procedure once, and the front desk nurse handed me a 3-page form to sign. I started reading it, and she got visibly annoyed, so I kept reading. Found on second page a sentence like this: "Patient agrees to pay all billing amounts resulting from this procedure." I asked, "What does this include? Can you provide me with an estimate of the charges?" She said no. I said I'm not signing it because the doctor could throw in a 3-week vacation to Florida or whatever else he/she wants as a result of the procedure. That led to a standoff, me not signing, her not taking me back to the procedure room. I was asked to sign a form at court indicating I had read my soon-to-be ex-wife's financial statement. When I questioned it, the revenue representative insisted that I didn't need to see it. I then refused outright because it was sketchy as fuck, and he started raising his voice trying to intimidate me into signing. I started laughing and asked if I was on a hidden camera show, and he flipped his shit and threatened to pull me before the judge today, and trust me, you don't want that. I said that of course I did indeed want that, why wouldn't I want that, and he simply grabbed the form, which was right next to him, and let me read it. It was both confusing and amusing. Some people have a tiny bit of power, and it goes right to their heads. In the States, typically the frontline staff dealing with the patients, from the clerical staff right on up to the physicians themselves, don't actually have any idea what charges go onto a patient's bill. Asking a secretary or nurse what something will cost you, or what the charge will be, is like asking your cashier what is the store's markup for any given item. They'll never know, because it's outside their realm of responsibility. In US healthcare, the frontline staff submit what was done during the visit, and then a computer program and a spreadsheet jockey tucked away in the bowels of the facility churn out a bill. The spreadsheet jockey and the frontline staff never interact. One that disturbed me was the terms of agreement for DNA/ancestry testing. They reserved the right to sell your genetic information to third-party companies. They're probably taking people's DNA, cloning them, raising their genetic clone baby twins, subjecting them to sick Nazi-esque market research and testing, then selling it back to them at a premium, then selling the babies off to dog food companies after they've fulfilled their use, and marketing that as grain-free organic dog food. Then people are surprised when their dog nips at them. He has a taste for human flesh. And all because you wanted to know if you really are 1/16th Cherokee. I gotta take my meds. Imagine if Blue Cross or Aetna decided to buy this genetic data along with the names and addresses of who it belongs to, and then decided to use this information to decide on what premiums to charge. Now imagine that this isn't common knowledge, and generally won't be until at least 1/3 of the US population has their DNS registered through a service like 23andMe. Next, imagine if you couldn't get health insurance at all for any price until your DNA was registered with one of these companies. As much as I'd love to see where my ancestry comes from, the short-term benefit doesn't outweigh the long-term problems that can happen. My mortgage had a clause that says that, in the event that I fail to fulfill my payment duties, I sign that they can claim and sell my house. No biggie there. Furthermore, I'm expected to grant the bank the right to sell off any future assets I may obtain after the signing of the mortgage agreement. This is necessary as they only have the right to sell assets specifically mentioned in a contract, and my future assets cannot be specified currently. Should I refuse to grant them this right in the future, then I have also hereby granted the bank legal authority to sign my future possessions off to them on my behalf. When I was reading my employment contract, I noticed a section titled something like assignation of inventions or something like that. The section stated in legalese that anything I invented, the definition of which included anything I thought up and eventually made something out of, was the legal property of the company, even if I was not at work when I thought of it or created it. As a writer, this concerned me, but in an appendix there were exceptions noted for employees living in one of the 4 or 5 states, I'm in the US, that have legal protections for this sort of thing, which included my state. So I flipped to the appendix to check, and all of the state exceptions were listed except for mine. I told the HR person who had offered me the job that I couldn't sign, and why. She assured me that it must have just been an oversight, and that legal would correct it. A couple of days later she provided me with a corrected version, which I signed. About a year later I applied for a new position in the same company and got it. When I got the contract for the new position I again read it carefully, this time looking for the exception for my state first thing. It wasn't there. Once again I called bullshit and they fixed it, but I live on the border of another state which has no legal protections for this sort of thing and many of my co-workers live there and commute. I wonder how many of them don't realize that if they write a best-selling book, or start a successful YouTube channel, or are in a band for which they write music which suddenly tails off or painstakingly code a video game in their spare time that turns out to be the next Minecraft or something, that the company can swoop in when their success is already secured and say, yeah, your employment contract said this, and you signed it. So now we own that. Always read your contract.